How are we setting that welcome table? What does our commitment to inclusion look like? What forms can it take? International Women's Day is set aside to lift up one group of people that have long been excluded from a place at that table. Why? Why, over the last 5,000 years or so, have women been systematically held to a limited sphere of influence and power? Two Unitarian Universalist women researched the religious roots of sexism and devaluing of women, and they presented their findings in the form of two groundbreaking curricula to help the rest of us learn what happened, why, and what we can do. I'd like to tell you a little bit about these prophetic people I've been privileged to call colleagues and friends. Reverend Dr. Shirley Rank is a theologian and author of a series called Cakes for the Queen of Heaven. It's an 11-session curriculum that brings us a close look at the role of the feminine divine in Western civilizations. Shirley's been a psychologist and UU minister as well as a writer. She's in her 90s, finally retired, and actually lives in Niles, Michigan right now with family. Elizabeth Fisher was an activist, author, creatrix, and a wise woman who wrote a curriculum honoring the feminine divine around the world, the follow-up to Cakes. She called that Rise Up and Call Her Name. In 13 sessions, Rise Up shows us many faces of the goddess. Liz passed away last September in her home in California with her husband and partner, activist Bob, by her side. Here are some of their words. Liz wrote in her booklet, Women's Rights Are Human Rights. My interest in the international human rights movement for women's rights started at an early age in the 1950s, when I could not ignore the inferior status of girls and women around the world. I was a feisty girl with supportive parents whose values included opposing sexism. I made a commitment then to not allow myself to be discriminated against. Not always easy to do by myself, I found out. This dedication to fair treatment was stimulated by both my involvement with liberal religious philosophy as a teen and my interest in the values and principles from my civics classes, where I learned that central to being a loyal American was defending liberty and justice for all. I came to realize that so many were left out of the definition of all, women and African Americans, to name a few. Because I was proud to be an American citizen, I felt it was my duty to actively challenge inequities. I met a lot of others who felt as passionate about this responsibility as I did. It took some time, though, to discover the power of participating with others around these concerns. In the 1980s, when I was in my 30s, I became acquainted with the international women's movement through my friends within the Unitarian Universalist Women and Religion movement, which I joined. Several key colleagues there, women 20 to 30 years older than I was, were deeply involved in the United Nations International Women's Conferences that took place in 1975, 1980, and 1985. They enthusiastically reported back about what had taken place in Mexico City, Copenhagen, and Nairobi, the locations of the conferences. I was encouraged by them to attend the International Non-Governmental Women's Rights Conference near Beijing in 1995, where a plan of action was adopted. Despite controversy both in the US and China about what they disparagingly called the radical feminist agenda, 50,000 women made their way to this gathering in the Huairao district of Beijing. Many came after funds were raised by their friends back home. Poor women were sponsored, so the event would be truly representative. I decided, despite major uncertainties in my own life, that it was important to be there. It changed my life to be among these passionate advocates. Reverend Dr. Rank writes, "We need to know the truth about female power and its dismemberment, and about the desacralization of the earth under patriarchy, because it is part of our history as human beings. And we need to envision and celebrate our oneness even as we learn to rejoice in our colorful diversity. We do not come to invade or colonize, but to remember and create together a new vision for the future. In the process of writing Cakes for the Queen of Heaven, I discovered some aspects of pre-patriarchal religion that I had not expected. Perhaps the most important was reverence for the earth and the cycles of nature. As a thoroughly urban person, I was only minimally aware of the phases of the moon, the coming of an equinox or solstice. I had long been in love with the crashing waves and iridescent life of the oceans. I had stared in wonder at the beauty of the California redwoods. But I had related these feelings only peripherally to my religion. For the old religions, Earth was another name for the divine female creator. I learned to sing, "We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean." I began to see the connection between the dishonoring of women and the exploitation of the earth. Cakes was about women and their lives. While we meditated upon the phases of the moon and called for harmony with Earth's elements, we did not take up directly the relationship between the powerlessness of women and the ecological crisis of the earth. We need to make central a new respect for the earth and for women.